Right, so good evening, everyone. It's so lovely to join you. This is the first time I think I've actually come onto this platform, and so I thank Eve for her invitation. We were having a chat some time ago, and I think I wasn't able to make it. Was going to be both of us, my husband and myself. We weren't able to make it, and so I said, "Well, tell me about it in the future, and I'll get back to you." So it's one of those things, but it's so lovely that such a platform exists to talk about these different things, and there's lots of complexity within this. I'm just wondering, I don't know if this is your usual practice, but I'd just like to have a prayer before we start. And the reason for that is because I've had, as you can tell, so many hiccups with joining, and to the point that I can't even share my PowerPoint presentation now. But let's have a prayer. You probably had one already, but I probably missed that. So I guess the prayer's probably more for me too. Okay, Father God, just be with me, please, as I present, as we share, because that's what this is all about, that we can share and encourage each other. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, thank you. Okay, so Eve and I were having a chat, and she asked me, "Say, what topic would you like to cover?" And I said, "My word, this is so broad, isn't it? You know, when we talk about singleness, this is so broad. We can talk about this for ages." So one of the things she came up with, or we came up with together, was how to choose a partner. So I'm happy for you to interject at times and ask a question or make a comment. So I'm happy for that to happen. So do just let me know when you want to say something, who you are, and then we can come to you. So I guess I just wanted to find out if that's what everybody's expecting tonight. How to choose a partner?
Yes.
Just
yes.
Thumbs up. Lovely. One voice. Perfect. That's good.
Yes.
So I was trying to figure out where to start with this one. And the only thing I could, because let me just backtrack a little bit. We've all been single at various points in our lives. I realised that some of us here have never been married, and then there's others that may have, and then there's someone in the process of. So there's a variety of issues around singleness in terms of where you are in the stage of it. So I was single for a long time. I didn't actually get married until my late 20s, and I am married to my lovely husband Andrew now. At the time, I remember when I was 23, 24, 25, people saying, "So Andrea, when are you going to get married?" You know, that question is such a big and deep question. I don't know, Eve, have you gone through that as well?
Yes, when you start to get that question, then you start realizing, I think I'm of age now. Everyone's thinking about this for me.
Yeah. And I remember thinking 24, 25 is a bit young. It would have been ideal had I met someone maybe then. But, you know, I thought to myself, okay, well, I've got time. And so it made me realize that for myself, I then felt under pressure as a young person to, my word, I've got to try and look for somebody now then. And it was kind of what I wanted. I think for a long time, my past had influenced where I was as well. And I remember telling myself up until the age of 22, because my parents had separated when I was quite young, and that impacted me, because then I felt that I'm not going to be marrying young. I want to make sure I know what I'm doing, and I find the right person that has the same mindset as me. So that's a little bit about me, but about the background of this thing and my thinking. And so I guess moving forward a little bit then, I thought, where is a good starting point with fellow believers? A good starting point is always the Bible. So I began to look at different texts in the Bible about what does God say about choosing a partner? What is it that he says? He must say something. And I was quite curious, and I think some of my curiosity was relieved, actually. So I'd like to share some of those texts before going to further discussion. And as I say, if someone's able to find one of the texts, that would be good. We don't need to go through all of them. But one of the things I found was there are some texts on choosing a husband and choosing a wife. I'm not sure if you've covered this already, Eve, so forgive me if I'm already going through the same text, Bible text. Have you?
I'm not sure. Let's hear what you have.
Okay, then. So I've got this one. One of the things I wanted to say as well before I go into Bible text, to just remember that there is no one perfect person. There is not one of us that's perfect in this world. Only one, and that's God. He's the only one that's perfect. So that was something that hit me quite hard, not only into my own marriage, my own experience, but also when I was reading these Bible texts, that's what they were highlighting. So the first one is that particular one taken from Mark chapter 10, verse 18, that there is no one perfect, only God. So in case we have it in our minds, just in case we have it in our minds, I want to dispel that myth that there is no one perfect person. Only God is perfect. I've got 1 Corinthians 7, verse 3, and that one's about the husband fulfilling duty to the wife. And so in that text, what did I learn about choosing a partner? The husband loving the wife, the person that you are looking for, whether you're a male or female, the partner that you're looking for, the husband or the wife that you're looking for, love needs to be there, and not just on the surface of it, but it needs to be that that person is willing to compromise with you and you're willing to compromise with that person. I think that's a good tester there. So that's 1 Corinthians 7, verse 3. And that was about the husband fulfilling the duty to the wife. The next one I'm going to share with you is Ephesians 5:23. For the husband is the head of the wife. And I know that text raises a lot of discussions. I've had lots of discussions with that one over a number of years. The next one I want to share with you is, just bear with me a second, please don't do this, computer. It's Proverbs 18:22, and it talks about he who finds a good wife finds a good, I don't know what the rest of that is because I didn't write the whole text out, but Proverbs 18:22. I wonder if someone's able to find that and just briefly read that, if that's possible. If not, then what I can do, or what if you're happy to.
I've got it here. It says, whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor of the Lord.
Okay, did everyone get that one? So that was taken from Proverbs 18:22. Eve, thank you so much for reading that. Proverbs 18:22. And the next one I looked at was Proverbs 31:23. Her husband is known in the gates. That's the beginning of it. I don't know if anyone's interested in reading that particular one. Proverbs 31:23. Her husband is known in the gates.
Okay,
That's really part of that text.
I've got that one. It says, her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. Lovely.
Thank you. So that one to me, I mean, does that sound, these are kind of setting principles, really, about who to look for. Her husband's known in the gates. In other words, he's known in his community. He's known for something. He stands out for doing something positive. So that could potentially be a hint, or a tip rather, not a tip for someone who's looking for either a male or a female. What is it that they do? What is it that they aspire to? Are they people, or are they an individual that likes to help other people? They may be involved in a charity, they may be involved in some kind of mission, they may already have some kind of mission or charity or something that they're supporting. So I'm not saying that they have to have that, but these are kind of principles that we can look at to kind of guide us. The one before talked about he who finds a good wife finds a good thing. Now, whatever the good wife means, we're going to continue looking at that, because those, as I say, those principles apply for both males and females. Then we've got Ephesians 5:33. It says, nevertheless, each among you is to love his own wife even as himself. And I find that really interesting, because as I was reading some of the Bible texts, I noticed it quite interesting to say, where it says, husbands, love your wives. And then there's another text that talks about wives, respect your husband. Now, I know some of you, you're looking for a partner. I hear this. But what I'm trying to say is some of these texts give us an outline, some kind of guidance in what we can do and what we ought to be looking for. Does that make sense so far? Let me just hear if there's any questions or thoughts on that.
I do have one question.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. What if you don't love yourself?
And that's such a good question. Is that Spencer?
It is, yes.
That's such a good question, Spencer, because I'm about to touch on some of that as well. So I wonder if you can hold on to that a little bit, because it's so poignant. It's so important that we love ourselves. Let me hold on to that. Can you come back, remind me of that question a little bit later?
Yeah, will do.
Perfect, because it's really important to this. And so, before I share this other text, then it says also, I found one in Titus 1 and verse 6, and it says, oh, in fact, if somebody could read that for me, Titus chapter 1 verse 6. If not, I can just condense it for now then, in the interest of time. Namely, if any man is above reproach, the husband of one wife, ... And I thought that was quite interesting as well, because when we're looking for a partner, we need to make sure that they aren't married. And I know that sounds a bit crazy, but we're living in a weird world where people do the strangest of things that we don't expect. So be prepared for some surprises and some unusual things.
It also mentions children here. It says, if any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly.
Wow. And that says a lot as well, doesn't it? So it's are the children, what are the children, if there are children, and adult children in particular, or even young children that can speak, because maybe the person's remarrying or something, what are the children saying? What are the family members saying about this individual? People that know this individual well, what are they saying? Because it's important for us to do our research. When I got to know Andrew, or as I was getting to know him, I should say, and he did the same. As we were getting to know each other, we had friends in common, actually. He had some friends that were also my friends. I'd never met him, but we knew that similar people. And so I began asking questions about him. So what does he do? What's he like? What does he like doing? Who are his friends? And he was asking the same things about me. So how important it is for us to ask sometimes awkward questions. And it may sometimes appear that we're even being nosy, but if we don't ask, how will we know? So those are some of the texts that I found that I feel can give some kind of insight or guidance. Because I know that you may be thinking, these Bible texts seem different to my question, how do I find a partner? However, if we look at the principles about character, then we can begin to get an idea for choosing a partner. So I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts or questions on that just now. No? Okay. Did someone just speak? Sorry, don't want to miss you.
No, I was saying there doesn't seem to be any questions.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of start moving towards what the gentleman said earlier. But before I go into that, I just wanted to just touch on this part really, which is the bit about relationships. I mentioned that no one being perfect, the only person that's perfect is God. And, you know, in an ideal world, if we look in Genesis, in an ideal world, this is a world without sin. God intended that no one should be lonely, no one should be left to feel alone. And loneliness is one of the key things as well, isn't it, with sometimes singleness, where sometimes people can go back to their families and have discussions or discuss whatever it is they want to. You may not always have that luxury to maybe have that closeness. You've got close friends and so forth, but you may not have that luxury to go and talk to someone about how terrible your day was or something else. So in an ideal world, that's what God wanted for all of us. And for God, so in God's eyes, marriage was meant to be one of the most uplifting and edifying aspects of the human existence. This is all before sin, of course, isn't it? I'm just wondering how have our lives been? Who's we've and the reason why I'm asking that is because this is a question that I sometimes work with people, and I try to use like a lifeline. Anyone heard of a lifeline? And your family lifeline is essentially a line. If you were to follow me with a page, imagine a plain piece of paper, and it's got a line through the middle of it, and right at the beginning is talking about when you were born. What are the different events that may have happened across your life? And this is relevant to choosing a partner as well, because this is how this is about our own experiences and recognizing what our own experiences are and how that can impact us in terms of when we're choosing someone. So this lifeline thing, that is an exercise that I've done with children, with couples, with teenagers. We do, you know, Andrew and I've used this together, and I've used it separately as well in my own work. And along this lifeline, you then start at the beginning. So maybe you start at the left and start when you were born, and you mark down the key events that may have happened along your life. So maybe you had an older brother or sister, maybe there was a bereavement of a grandparent, maybe parents separated. I mean, I'm kind of using an example, that some are my own and some belong to other people. There may have been bereavement, maybe parents separated, maybe you had an older sibling who remained in the Caribbean or remained somewhere else. Maybe you have step siblings, step brothers and sisters, step parents. How did that impact you? Maybe you had a close relationship with one of your parents, but not the other. How did that impact you? And then maybe you move to your teenage years, maybe some of this is happening in your teenage years, and you begin to look at what are some of the things, who were those closest to me? What friends did I have? What friendship groups did I have? Do I still have those friendship groups? Are they people that I still have access to? Do they have access to me? You can look at who were you closest to in your teenage years, and what were the significant events going on in your teenage years. And I say all of this because as we begin to look at different events that may or may not have happened in our lives, traumatic and good, I'm not just focusing on traumatic, sometimes this can help us to see maybe what might be maybe missing in my life in terms of what is it that I want from a partner to help me to grow, to help fulfill who I am. One of the things I thought of for my husband was that because I had a bit of a mistrust, I suppose, with some males, then I needed to work with that for myself, and I needed to help him to help me to do that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So, Eve, I don't know if you can still hear me. I'm guessing everyone can hear me, but
We're hearing.
okay, lovely. So that made that was quite significant for me, because that was one of the reasons why, for me, I felt in my early 20s I didn't need to get married yet, or even as a teenager I was thinking I didn't need to get married yet. So I guess what I'm saying is those things are really important, because they help us to know who we are. And it's not until we begin to address our own needs, our own desires, our own wants, our own traumas, our happiness, when we begin to address those kinds of things, because remember, it's going to come out in a relationship. Just know that whatever you've gone through in your life, you're going to talk about it with your future partner. They're going to talk about their issues with you as well. And it's about how you can help to develop each other, but also recognize that this person is not going to meet every need in my life. It's impossible, because they're a human being. And that's why it's so important for us to know for ourselves what issues have troubled me in my childhood, in my teenage years, in my 20s, 30s, 40s, blah, blah, blah. And what people am I closest to? Do I have close male acquaintances? Do I have a grandfather or an uncle or somebody that I looked up to that was really important to me? Do I have a female in my life that was important to me now, maybe a sister or a grandmother or auntie or whatever? All of those things are important, because I'm alluding to the term we use in, you'll probably have heard this word time and time again, attachments. Who we're attached to. Attachment was talked about first by John Bowlby. And in attachments, it's about who we related to, who was closest to us, who we felt closely attached to while we were growing up. And that's so important for us as human beings, because that is kind of outlines who we are, who we were attached to, whether perhaps our mothers were close to us or not, or our fathers were close to us. Were they always there? Was there consistency in that relationship? So all of those things can impact who we are today and impact who we choose for a life partner, because sometimes we're looking for someone to fill that gap. But the truth is, not all our gaps can be fulfilled. Not all our gaps can. And that's why we have to deal with and look at different things in our lives. For me, I think that's important, the lifeline. I look at mine every so often and see what is it that I have dealt with or haven't dealt with. What is Andrea looking like at this age and stage? How are you? Those kinds of things. Those are really important for us. I'm going to pause just there and just ask if anyone has any questions just now.
I listened to what you were saying, and yeah, I get that. I somehow wondered, how would you, if you were brought up in a way whereby you felt disconnected and lost during your childhood, how would that impact you as an adult?
Wow, if you felt like that as an adult, then it could lead you into a different direction there, couldn't it? It could either lead you to be slightly colder and indifferent, so that maybe hugs and affection is probably unusual for you, because you've not maybe received it. So therefore you could potentially be the person that doesn't even know it until you actually find somebody that you're attracted to and they're attracted to you, and you realize that actually I have a problem with holding their hands, or actually I have a problem with some kind of intimacy. later on, that is, when you're married. So it could impact you that way, or it could impact you in the sense that there's a level of mistrust where you feel that you're not able to trust whether that person is going to be there for you through thick and through thin. And so maybe you could be that individual that wants to know where this person is all the time. And those are the kinds of things that we have to, that sometimes it's not until we meet someone that those things come out. And that's why I suppose I say sometimes it's important for us to have a look within ourselves and see what is there that could potentially make me either lean too much to leaning to somebody so that they have to be my everything, or being completely the opposite way and thinking I don't need them. So it could impact you in so many different ways, and it's important to kind of almost find that middle ground where you know that I want this person to be there for me, I want to be there for me, but they cannot provide for me in every single way. They cannot meet all my needs. There's only one person that can do that, and that's God. But it's about recognizing that if there's insecurities about, maybe you want to know where this person is 24/7s, or even if you receive that they have to know where you are 24/7s. Those are kinds of things that, are awkward conversations that also need to be talked about. I've just given one minute example, but there's so many, it's so broad, there's so many things that we can look at in ourselves, and just as we begin to know ourselves and understand ourselves, then we can then begin to understand the person that we meet, or that we have met, or that we're about to marry. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask for some questions just now then. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was only responding to say yes for your last question.
Okay, do you have any questions or any thoughts on that?
Thank you.
Does anyone disagree with that? Because that's fine as well, because I think just in terms of having a discussion so that I kind of know whether this is working for some or not working for some, or making sense for some, not if I'm missing anyone anywhere.
No, I think it's very good. It's something that I've never done before, a lifeline, but yeah, I think something that I will do, and just try and see, just to see how it might impact relationships for the future.
Thank you, Eric. Anyone else? Have I lost Eve as well?
I'm here.
Are you still there, Eve?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you had any thoughts or anything on that.
No, it makes sense. It does make sense. I think it is something, whenever you're going into a relationship, to know yourself.
And the thing is, you're not going to completely know who you are. It's not until you get into your marriage then, and even when you're dating somebody, you begin to see things back. Okay, lovely. Okay, so should we have a quick recap then on what we've gone through? So we've talked a bit about then what the Bible says about in terms of principles, in terms of how to choose a partner. And I've given various Bible texts. Hopefully you've had the chance to write them down. I can always go through them again if you want to, just so that you can make a note of them. And that kind of gives us an idea of the principles that we're looking for in terms of choosing a partner. Then the next thing I spoke about was the importance of getting to know ourselves, who we are as individuals, so that we know who we are, so that when we meet someone, we are very mindful of who we are, but then we also have space to begin to take in and understand this person as well. because human beings, we are complex beings, aren't we? We can be quite complex. There's lots of different angles to us. So it's important to know who we are, what we stand for, where we're going. How has perhaps our past affected who we are today? And there's no wrong or right to it. It's just, it is what it is. And maybe some support can be acquired with all of that, because sometimes we get to a point we realize that there are some issues that we might want to work through. Because the interesting thing is when we meet someone, they're going to have a complex past as well. So just recognize that too. And so the two of you kind of need a bit more time then to be able to understand each other. And it's only understanding yourself that you can, as I say, have room for understanding that other person too. The other thing is I was thinking of, so I mentioned the lifeline then as being an exercise that everyone can try, and it's good to do it at different stages in your life. You can do it now, you can do it when you meet someone, you can do it while, when you marry. It doesn't matter, but it's important that we begin to look at that and just acknowledge for ourselves what's there for us, what's happened for us, what may be still going on for us. One of the other things that I was thinking about as well when I began to think of this was some tips, because I thought of as well. Sorry, before I go into that, let me come to the question that I'm sorry, I've missed your name.
Spencer, what if you don't like yourself?
Spencer. Are you still with us, Spencer?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm listening.
So back to your question, what if we don't like ourselves? Because the simple solution is, if we don't like ourselves, we will struggle to accept the person that we're attracted to, the person that we want to spend the rest of our lives with. If we don't like ourselves, then we will manifest our love, our mistrust. It just comes out in often a negative way, and it can be difficult then to actually form attachments and positive attachments if we don't like ourselves. So if we don't love ourselves, we must at least like something about ourselves. And that's why this lifeline is also important, because sometimes there's reasons around why we don't like ourselves. Sometimes it could be that we've gone through abuse, maybe at different stages of our lives, that we have either been able to talk about or not been able to talk about. So it's a lived experience, but has that lived experience been a shared experience? And sometimes if it hasn't been a shared experience, because it's been secrets, keep yourself sane or whatever at that point, because perhaps no one believed you. I mean, those are reasons why sometimes people dislike themselves. It could be so many things. I don't know if anyone has anything they wanted to add to that, but there's lots of reasons why people dislike themselves. I've got something here. It says, how does not liking oneself manifest? Okay, how does it manifest? I think that question was asked, and I think it manifests itself often in negative ways. It's how we may treat ourselves, but it's how often we treat each other as well, because sometimes people that don't like themselves or don't love themselves may be angry people. I'm not saying this is the case all the time, but that may be one way that it manifests themselves. They're angry with everyone. They feel that they have to snap at everyone. They don't feel satisfied with people. They can sometimes be antagonistic. Or maybe it's the opposite way. You don't like yourself, so you don't think that you have the right to speak, the right to be heard, the right to be listened to, the right to contribute to anything, because you don't consider yourself as valuable. So in a relationship, all of those attributes can be quite really difficult. Let's just say they can be really difficult in a relationship if maybe you are that person, or if you meet somebody that is like that, because our natural response to somebody who perhaps is the quieter version and doesn't feel that they have the right to contribute or the right to say, they almost come across as apologetic. We kind of want to help them. But in a relationship, that can be difficult, because then it means that you're dealing with your stuff and you're also dealing with the other person's as well. Whereas really how it should be is that that person has to deal with their thing, as do you. And then together, once you've dealt with some of you as much as you can, then when you come together, you support each other as best you can. Does that help to answer that question? Just tell me. Let me hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I get that. I really put a note here that if we don't like ourselves, we struggle to accept other people. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah. You could be cold and indifferent, and intimacy does become a problem then. If you don't like yourself, how can you accept someone else? That's the question that I would ask. And so it's important for us to like and love ourselves, like something about ourselves. And if we find ourselves in that position, then I think it's important to kind of work with that. And sometimes it's difficult to just work these things with us by ourselves. Sometimes we might need some assistance through counselling. And there's nothing wrong with counselling, because counselling helps us to address some of what may be in here or in here that hasn't had the opportunity to come out for whatever reason. So it's really important. Do we have any other questions? Any thoughts? Any thoughts on what's been said? Because I know I've said a lot, and I'm just aware, so I'm a little bit quiet. I've said a lot, so I don't know if there's any thoughts or disagreement or anything that you want to add to what I've said.
Can I just clarify? So, are you saying that one of the ways that you can overcome this issue, in addition to counselling, if you need counselling, is that you maybe think about something that you like about yourself? That's one of the ways that you can overcome those issues.
Yeah, I think, well, it's certainly by prayer as well. Maybe some of our friends or family members can tell you one thing about yourself that, you know, they appreciate. But just in the events, because sometimes our cultural sensitivity isn't always that great. So sometimes we have to do it ourselves. And what is it about me that I like? And maybe begin making a list of things that you do. Well, I do this well. I can do this, and I like that I can do that. I like that I have this skill. I like that I have this talent. I like that I, anything, whatever it is, but try to have a look at this list. It's so important, because in liking and beginning to like and love yourself, it does make it a lot easier to begin to like and love someone else. Because as I mentioned earlier, if you mentioned, I said, there is no one that is perfect. Only God is perfect. Whichever partner or person you meet or choose is not going to be perfect. So it's about then, and it can be more detrimental to your relationship or to the future of your relationship if you struggle to accept them or they struggle to accept you. Because that's the thing, you can try to work on yourself, but they also need to work on themselves as well. And if they haven't, it will manifest itself in lots of different ways, and they may try to be controlling as well. And the person who, might be very controlling, when you met them a couple of times and they're already saying this, that, and the other about you, or you would look better this way if you did this, and whatever, that can potentially be a bit of a worrying thing to begin with, because you just want to get to know the person, and they can begin to accept you, and you can begin to accept them. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? So if we learn to like or love ourselves, then I think we're more aware when we meet somebody who maybe have a negative impact on ourselves as a person, because they might have a problem with us. So if you know yourself, and you prayed about this, and you looked at this, and you can be more mindful of who you are as a person, because we can't change people. We can influence people through love. We can influence people, and I guess that's what I'm saying as well in marriage, because let me give an example of myself. I think when I met my husband, I was quite an impatient person. I wanted things happening now. And I've learned over the years, the many years, that things do take time, and I have to be patient with people, and I have to be patient myself, because that was the thing. A lot of the impatience is coming from me more than anything. And so because I was impatient with me, then that I pushed that onto my husband to be at that time, as well. And so it was something I've learnt and am still learning to manage and work through within our marriage and so forth. So that's just one example that I'm giving. Yeah, does that make sense? Does that help?
Yes, it makes sense, but I wanted to just add to that as well. I think that in our Christian circle, I don't know whether we tend to promote thinking about what's good about us, basically. I don't think it's something that we tend to do. I think it's something that we tend to shy away from, I think. I'm not sure of what.
And I think there's some truth in, with you saying that we don't always acknowledge ourselves for the good that we've done, or the good things about us. But here's the thing, this is how God sees us. He sees us as marvelous, magnificent. Even with all our faults, God still sees us as wonderful people. So we have to begin to ignore what the enemy's telling us. Try to put aside what the enemy's telling you. You're nothing. You've done this, and you've done this, and you've done. The enemy will do that. It will make you feel that you're inadequate and you're not good enough. The truth is, we can never be good enough, but in God's eyes, we are wonderful, amazing. And He wants us to begin to look at ourselves, because we're His created being. He wants us to begin to look at ourselves and each other through His eyes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts or contributions to that? I'm just mindful of the time, Eve. It's 10 to 9, and I've spoken a lot, but if there's any questions or any thoughts.
Andrea, can I just ask a question? I think I understand from what you mentioned that there are times when, let's say, there were issues in our lives, perhaps as a young person or as a child. When you meet someone, you might find you have to walk through a number of issues, if I understand you right. But you might not know what issues you need to walk on, because you might not necessarily have a recollection of what your childhood was or what event you may have suffered. So are you able to tell me a little bit more about, if I understood you right about that, how do you go about, let's say, getting answers or receiving support for something you may have encountered if you don't really remember? Do you just do a general check to see if all is well? How do you really go about it? This is really in response to what I thought you said. I may be wrong in hearing what you've said, so maybe a bit of clarity as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope I can answer it then. Tell me if I still haven't touched it.
Yeah.
It's important for us to know about ourselves. What things have we gone through that make us who we are? So whether they're good things or bad things. So in that timeline, you're not just talking about negative stuff, you're talking about some really positive stuff as well. But in looking at that, we can begin to see what some of the things are. Now, I know some of us might not remember back to the age of 4, but some of us might have good memories of it. Sometimes if you've got a parent that's still alive and they're able to tell you a bit about yourself as you were growing up or what was going on at the time that you were young, that also makes a difference too. See what you can remember. It's just about what you can remember. You can only talk about and deal with what you can remember. But here's the funny thing about our memory. Our memories, the more we think about our past, the more we remember.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes we have to challenge our thinking because that's how the brain works.
Yeah.
You begin to start tapping into some things in the past, you will begin to remember them. But as human beings, sometimes we try to pack away the painful things. We'll try to remember the good things, and that's okay. But at some point, the not so good things are going to come back around, whether it's coming back to our memory, whether it's going to come back through our behavior or whatever. It's going to come back at some point because that's how our brains work. So it's good to be able to try to process some negative things that may have happened. That, oh, maybe I do this because of this. So it's good to check ourselves. It is good to do that.
Okay.
So I would suggest maybe, you mentioned what if we don't remember, maybe challenge some of ourselves. And that's where the timeline bit comes in handy. You might not be able to do it in one sitting. You might look at it maybe a couple of days later or a week later and go, oh, do you know what? I remember myself. So you might, let me just give a bit more description of the timeline. So you've got a piece of paper, and you've got a line straight through the middle of it, yeah? And on the left-hand side, you started with the day you were born. If you know different things that were happening, for example, where your parents or parent or whatever might have lived, maybe you didn't grow up with your parents, maybe you grew up with an aunt or an uncle. When did that happen? Was at age 1, age 2, and you write different things that happen. Oh, baby brother was born, or second sister was born at age 3. Then you move on to the next one. Oh, maybe let me go back a bit. I went to this particular nursery. Oh, actually, I remember having a friend at that nursery. That was a really good friend. So you write that down as well. Then you move on to the next bit, and then you just go through your life and marking out significant events. 1984, I left school. Passed my exams, or didn't get on so well, or loved school, or hated school, or whatever. This was my best teacher. And then you go on, you write to the next age 17, 18, and you go down the line. You might have had a bereavement, you might have had a separation, you might have had lots of different things happen. But it's so interesting to do that, because as you do that, you actually begin to map out your life and actually see, these are the events that have happened in my life that's made me who I am, that's made me the person I am today. Some things we can, does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I understand. I like the timeline aspect of your response, because with doing a timeline, it would help you to fill in some of the gaps where you might have forgotten as well. So I think the timeline is interesting. Yeah, thank you.
I hope that'll be a good exercise for everyone to try. And remember, you can do it at different points. And so what I found for me is I kept adding on bits of paper, because I was like, I didn't even remember this. I didn't even remember this. And it's something that, as I say, I still like to do, and I still use it within my work context and my personal context. Because if I'm asking people at work to do it, or I'm asking couples to do it, then I need to have an idea of something about myself as well. I need to go through that same exercise as well to make it make sense for me too. So both my husband and I have done this separately, and then we've looked at each other's as well and said, what do you remember about that? how does that make you feel now? You know, and we
So,
can open up about
so
that.
did you have like any similarities with yourself and your husband that maybe some of yours might not have been, if I may be personal, might not have been, you know, comfortable, let's say, and was there any case where his was kind of the same and you felt like, oh, we have some things in common, even though it's not very pleasant? Did you have that kind of experience?
Yeah.
If I may ask this question,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if
You
it's
can
too
ask the
personal.
question, and I can give you the answer. Yes, you know, because we both experienced our parents separating while we were quite young,
Okay.
and that had quite an impact on us. And I don't think I realised quite how that affected me as a female, as a young teenager growing up, my
Okay.
trust in men. Because as far as I was concerned, men aren't always going to be there for you. So why invest in a relationship? Why get married? And that was I kept thinking that until my early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I got to my kind of not quite mid 20s, but nearly there, that I started to realize that this is what happened and this is how it affected me. But it doesn't mean that everyone has to be that way. It doesn't mean that I am my mum or my dad. I can be somebody else by the grace of God, because I was having a faith at that point. I was, and I say intentionally having a faith, because it wasn't just about going to church. It was recognizing who God is and who I am because of God. So I began working on myself and thinking about who I am, why my responses are to males that tell me to do things, why I respond in the way I do, for example. And I had to really look at that, and I was like, that's where that's coming from. That is where that's coming from for you, Andrea. And to work on that, begin looking at that and seeing, what do I need to change on this? Okay, now I know what has triggered this. What can I do about it? I hope that answers your question. Does it?
It does. It does. I just wonder if I could ask, you know, the issues that may have been similar or difficult between you and your husband then, how did you all deal with them? Was it a case of, okay, they're similar, so we have the same problem, you know, the solution might be the same? How did you both actually deal with those, if I may ask?
If I'm honest with you, some things we still deal with. Some things we still, because remember, no marriage is perfect. If anyone tells you their marriage is perfect, they're lying. Because you're going to have peaks and troughs. You know, you still love each other, and you recognize the differences, and you recognize, because we try to be open and honest with each other, and I think we've all done that really from the beginning. As you get to know each other, you don't say as much, but as the relationship begins to you know, on a deeper level, we decide we're going to get married. We just began talking about our backgrounds from then, and we had premarital counselling as well, which I have to say made a difference as well, because it also meant that we were challenged to talk about ourselves, to deal with different aspects of ourselves that, you know, I would have rather packed away and put away and not ever talked about. But it was good, because it's meant that came to my attention very early on, and it came to my husband's attention, and his ways as well were brought out. And then it simply meant that we had to be patient with each other as we began working through it. So we worked through some of our stuff separately. I mean, I worked. Yeah, does that help?
It does. It does. It does. Thank you.
Could I ask another question? Well, yeah.
If that can, I can.
Yeah. So, would you say then, from what you've just said, would you say that it's good to be to bear all to your partner, prospective partner. So I know you mentioned that when you decided to get married, that's when you started to open up and talk a lot more about those things that are, you know, very sort of things like the childhood and things like that. So
Yeah.
So, is it a case that you're saying that you should tell all? Because I mean, there might be things that I don't know, you've experienced, or that you'd prefer to keep to yourself. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
For me, I didn't bear all because we were still just beginning our relationship and we were still building our trust, because trust in a relationship is so important. And remember, I told you where my background, where I was coming from. So I couldn't just put it all in his hands. But while we were going through the couples counselling, there were lots of issues that were coming through, and I was recognising them for myself. So some things were coming out, but not everything. So I would say, you want to know who that person is. That person wants to know who you are as well, or at least that's how it should be. That whoever it is that when you're choosing a partner, they want to be curious. They want to be interested in you, not nosy. And you'll know the difference with nosiness and genuine interest. You'll know the difference. So you want them to be interested and curious about you, but still love you at the same time. They will ask you questions, and you're going to ask them questions. But I wouldn't say bear all straight away. No. I think there's a human tendency, because we all want to be seen as good, don't we? We all want to be seen and accepted. That's important for us. It's a natural human tendency. So we all put our best foot forward. All of us do that, don't we? I don't think it would be necessary. Does that help?
Question, isn't that deception?
Sorry, is what deception?
I'm asking if what you're saying, if that is not deception, because I think if you're getting to in a relationship with somebody, once it passes a stage where engagement is concerned, why is it a situation where you're going to hold back on information?
Well, I don't know who the question's directed to, but what I was thinking was, there might be things that happen to individuals that I don't think it would have necessarily any benefit with sort of discussing it. That's my thought. I know that you mentioned that you should discuss certain things when you start to become serious, but is this everything that you need to bear? That's I'm not saying that you're deliberately withholding, but things happen to people, and do you discuss everything, every single thing that's happened to you? That's
I mean, I'm gonna have to say, I leave it down to people really to make that decision. I know for me, it was important that I wanted Andrew to know about me. I wanted him to know my parents were divorced, for example. I wanted him to know, and the impact that had on me. I wanted him to know how many siblings I had. I wanted him to know some of the things that troubled me. But that was only because our relationship began to build on trust, in that he would share with me and I would share with him. Can you see where I'm coming from? So for the person who was saying, isn't that deception? I don't think so, because we all want to trust each other, but trust does take time. Like the love, the trust takes time as well. You're not going to give someone your everything and all, and you don't, that doesn't happen, does it? I'd like to hear from someone if it does, but usually it's little by little. You tell somebody a little at a time, and you see how they process it. If you can discuss it, if they're empathetic to you and you're empathetic towards them, then that person can trust you a little bit more, or they tell you a bit about themselves and discuss it, what's uncomfortable, what's nice, and you begin to slowly build up that trust with each other and confidence in each other, that that person's not only going to hold what you're telling them confidential, but also it matters to them how you're feeling, and they can see when you're upset. It's not going to be used against you, because that's so important. So those are the things to look out for, aren't they? If somebody's using, you've told them something about you that's personal, they're using it against you, there's a problem there in that relationship. Because you should be able to begin to share with one another. That's if that person is the right person. Because if that person is beginning to use that against you, that's not the person you want in your life. Because the trust is going very quickly with that, and they are doing something that's going to erode the trust. And if the trust is gone in a relationship, there's no relationship. I don't know if I have answered some of those questions, or if there's any thoughts, or I'll stop now, shall I? Because it's 8 minutes past 9, Eve. I don't know when I should stop that.
They could go on forever, but does anyone else have any further questions or comments?
That's all good. I really enjoyed this timeline that you mentioned, and I think I will use that and see how my life applies to that. So thank you very much for sharing.
Sure, you're welcome.
I endorse the timeline as well. I find that very reflective of one's life, and sort of give you a guide as to what you're going to be carrying over into a relationship. Because, some aspects of our lives, we sometimes consciously and unconsciously, we carry it into our relationship. So I do appreciate the timeline. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we've come to the end of today's meeting. So I want to say thank you, Andrea, for accepting the invitation, and thank you. I think we could all learn something from this, but specifically, I think that we'll all take away that timeline. I think that's something that I'm going to be using as well.
Yeah, I'll probably use it as well. I can remember most of my life, as I've got a pretty good memory, but I'll probably use it as well.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Saying thank you again. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining, and I'm really hoping that Andrea will be back with us again for another session.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Great.
You've got to invite her back, Eve.
Say that again.
I'm saying you have to invite her back.
Yes, I did. I did say to her that the time frame that we're working with. So if she can come back, that would be great.
Sure, that's fine. I'll be happy to.
Great. Thank you. Love having you on.
Hopefully the connection will be better, and the PowerPoint and everything that I prepared. But anyway, as long as you could have gotten something from this, then that's good.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay,
and
so
thanks also for your points as well and your questions. There's some really good questions that came up and some really good points that came up. And that's what this is all about, isn't it? It's all about all of us learning and sharing together. So thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.